If you ever find an old cassette tape in a dead person's house, do not press play. Not even once. Because some voices don't stay in the past. Some voices wait for you to listen, and then they learn your name. My name is Sarah. I am 26 years old. And 3 months ago, I found my mother's voice trapped inside a plastic box the size of my palm. I want to tell you exactly what happened, in order, because if I don't say it out loud, I think it will happen again. I think saying it keeps me safe. For now, please, just listen to the whole thing before you decide I'm crazy. By the end, I think you'll understand why I can't stop looking over my shoulder. Part 1. The empty house. My mother died in March. Cancer. Slow, then fast, the way the doctors always warn you it will be. I was with her at the end, holding her hand in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and flowers that were already dying in their vases. Her last words to me were soft, almost a whisper. She said, "Sarah, don't listen to anything that sounds like me if I'm not really there." I thought it was the medicine talking. She was on so much morphine by then. Her mind wandered. She said strange things all week, about shadows in the corner, about a man standing by the window who wasn't there, about a song she kept hearing that nobody else could hear. One night she woke up gasping and told the nurse, very calmly, that someone had been sitting on the edge of her bed, humming, and that the humming had her own voice in it. The nurse wrote it down as a hallucination, one line in a folder full of similar notes, and moved on to the next patient. I held my mother's hand and told her she was safe, that I was there, that nothing could hurt her. I didn't understand what she meant. I still don't, not fully. But I understand enough now to be afraid. After the funeral, it fell on me to clean out her house. I'm an only child. My father left when I was young, and it was always just me and Mom in that small house on Maple Row with the creaky third step and the kitchen window that never closed all the way. I hadn't lived there in years, but walking through the front door again felt like stepping into a museum of my own childhood. Everything smelled like her perfume, like old paper, like dust settling on furniture that hadn't been moved in decades. Her reading glasses were still sitting on the arm of the couch, folded neatly, waiting for a woman who was never coming back to pick them up. I gave myself 2 weeks to sort through everything. Clothes to donate, furniture to sell, photographs to keep. It was slow, heavy work, the kind that makes your chest hurt, even when your hands are just folding sweaters. Some days I got through 3 boxes. Some days I sat on the floor of her bedroom and cried for an hour and got through nothing at all. On the 5th day, I went up into the attic. I hadn't been up there since I was a kid, maybe 10 years old, playing hide and seek with a cousin who has long since stopped speaking to the family. The attic was smaller than I remembered, low-ceilinged, thick with dust that floated in the one beam of light coming through a small round window. Boxes were stacked everywhere, some so old the cardboard had gone soft and brown at the corners. There was a smell up there too, something under the dust, something faintly sweet and a little bit rotten, like flowers left too long in stale water. I started opening the boxes one by one. Old baby clothes, folded so small they looked like they belonged to a doll. Photo albums with plastic pages gone yellow and cracked. A box of my father's old vinyl records, which surprised me. I thought she'd thrown out everything of his the day he left. And then, near the back wall, tucked behind a rolled-up rug that smelled like mothballs, I found a small wooden box I didn't recognize. It was old, dark wood, with a little brass clasp gone green with age. It wasn't locked. Inside, sitting on a bed of faded red velvet, was a single cassette tape. No label. No writing anywhere on it. Just a plain black cassette, the kind you'd find in a bargain bin at a thrift store. But it wasn't dusty like everything else in that attic. It looked clean, almost new, like someone had placed it there recently, even though the box around it looked like it had been sealed for 20 years, maybe longer. The velvet underneath, it hadn't even flattened the way old velvet does. It looked like the tape had simply appeared there, resting, waiting. I don't know why, but I picked it up and held it to my chest for a moment, the way you'd hold something precious. Something told me this mattered. Something told me my mother had touched this last, that her fingers had been the last fingers on its plastic edges, and that holding it made me a little closer to her. I should have left it there. I know that now. I think somewhere underneath all my grief, some small animal part of me already knew that too, and I ignored it because grief makes you deaf to your own warnings. Part 2. The first time I pressed play, I didn't have a cassette player. Nobody does anymore. So I drove to 3 different thrift stores before I found an old boombox, dusty and covered in stickers from bands that broke up before I was born. The man at the counter tested it for me, and it worked, the wheels turning with a soft mechanical hum, the little orange power light blinking on like a tired eye. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with the boombox in front of me, the tape already loaded inside. My hands were shaking a little, which felt strange for something so small. It was just a tape. Probably an old mixtape, or maybe my mother reading me a bedtime story from when I was small. She used to record herself reading books for me when I was a baby, so I could hear her voice even when she worked late nights at the hospital where she was a nurse for almost 30 years. I pressed play. At first, there was only static, the hiss of old tape running through old machinery, that gray sound like rain on a tin roof. Then, slowly a voice came through. My mother's voice. Soft, warm, exactly as I remembered it, down to the small catch she always had in her throat when she was about to say something important. "Sarah," the voice said, "my sweet girl, if you're listening to this, then I'm already gone, aren't I? I'm sorry. I wanted more time." I always wanted more time with you. I started crying immediately. It felt like a gift, like she had left me one more conversation, hidden away for me to find when I needed it most. The voice continued, talking about small things, how proud she was of me, how she remembered the day I was born, how the nurses had let her hold me for almost an hour before anyone made her put me down, how she hoped I would find someone who loved me the way she had once loved my father before things went wrong between them. It was beautiful. It was exactly what a grieving daughter would want to hear. It felt like being wrapped in a blanket that had just come out of the dryer, warm all the way through. The tape ran for about 10 minutes before it clicked off on its own, the reel stopping with a soft thud. I sat there in the dark for a long time afterward, holding the boombox like it was a living thing, replaying her words in my head, hearing her voice again and again in my memory. I listened to it 3 more times that night. Each time, it felt like a hug from beyond the grave. I fell asleep on the floor of my living room with the boombox still sitting beside me, the small orange light glowing in the dark like a tiny lantern, and for the first time since the funeral, I slept without dreaming. Part 3. Something is different the next evening. I wanted to hear her voice again. I made tea, sat on the floor in the same spot, and pressed play, already smiling before the static even started, already bracing myself to cry the good kind of tears. The static came first, just like before. Then her voice. But something was wrong. "Sarah," the voice said, "my sweet girl, did you sleep well last night? You always used to toss and turn when you were anxious about something. I could always tell, even when you were a teenager and thought you were hiding it from me." I froze, my tea cooling in my hands. I had tossed and turned the night before. Actually, no, wait, I had fallen asleep on the floor, deeply, dreamlessly, the best sleep I'd had in weeks. That didn't match. But more than that, the tape from the night before hadn't mentioned anything about sleep at all. It had talked about my birth, about my father, about hoping I found someone to love me. This was a different conversation entirely, a new one, layered on top of the old one like a second coat of paint. I told myself I was misremembering. Grief does strange things to memory. Maybe I had just forgotten a section. Maybe the tape was longer than I thought, and I hadn't listened all the way through the first time, and this was simply a part one had missed. The voice continued. I know you found the wooden box in the attic. I know you drove to 3 stores looking for something to play me on. You always were stubborn like that. Even as a little girl, remember the time you refused to wear a coat in the snow because you wanted to prove you weren't cold? Do you remember the blue dress you wore to your 5th birthday party? You cried because it had a stain on it, and I told you nobody would notice, and you didn't believe me, and you sulked in the corner for 20 minutes until your father bribed you with cake. I did remember that dress. I hadn't thought about it in 20 years, hadn't thought about it since it happened, actually, and yet the memory came rushing back whole and complete the second the voice mentioned it, like a door swinging open onto a room I'd forgotten existed. And I definitely, absolutely had not told anyone that I had visited 3 thrift stores to find a boombox. I hadn't even told my best friend that specific detail. I had only said I'd found an old player somewhere. There was no way my mother could have recorded that information before she died. There was no way anyone could have known that unless they were watching me, right now in real time. My hands went cold. The tape clicked off again, exactly 10 minutes in. Same as before, the clicks sounding almost polite, like a door closing gently instead of slamming. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake in bed with all the lights on, staring at the boombox sitting silently on my dresser, feeling like it was staring back, the way you can feel someone watching you from across a dark room, even when you can't see their eyes.